Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Vestabon's Blood Box. We're here to talk about things metal, all things around metal and such, you know the spiel by now. Today we're going to again talk about in the around metal genre. I promise I have some dedicated metal videos coming up soon, but this is the one I've been talking about, I've been wanting to do for a while, and I finally got the CDs in that I was waiting on. And the reason I want to do this is because this band that I'm going to be talking about, I was obsessed with them when I was in high school. Some of you might roll your eyes a little bit when I tell you who it is, but they were very influential on me and definitely opened up the door of heavier music that would lead me down the path that got me to where I am today. So the band we're going to be talking about today is Him. If you're not familiar with Him, came out in the late 90s, big in the 2000s, called it quits in the mid 2010s. They're a Finnish goth rock band. Him, their name, which is HIM, is an acronym for His Infernal Majesty. Their style is definitely, it's that 2000s goth. If you remember in the last video, I was talking about how the 2000s sort of had a distinct sound mixed with the 90s too. I think they are one of those bands that did that. Similarly to Typo Negative, now I'm not going to compare them directly because they are different. Typo Negative definitely had more of a metal influence, and Him has more of a romantic, sort of poetic kind of goth, that kind of goth. But there's some similarities. So think of like Typo Negative's Bloody Kisses and that style of goth, where you've got the sort of dark candlelight and I don't know, castles and shit. That's not really what Typo Negative did, but you know what I'm talking about. The 90s and 2000s goth picture, what I always thought goth was before I learned about the other stuff. Anyways, I'm babbling on about that. So yeah, we're going to talk about them today. It's going to be a little bit different of the video because, again, this was a huge band to me back when I was in high school and in my formative years. So I'm going to be talking about some of my personal stories with the two, which are fun. And I've got some pictures I'll be showing also. So yeah, we'll just start off with the first album. I'm going to get you through the first 4 albums, which is sort of the first era, and then we'll go through the last 4, and after I do the first 4, I'll get into some of the stories involved with it. But let me get you introduced to the albums, if you're not familiar. So, real quick, Him started when they were in high school in the early 90s, or maybe late 80s. Mij and Ville Ballo, Mij is the bass player, Ville Ballo is the singer, started a band. I think it was called something different, but they landed on Him, got their other members, and put out a demo which is called 666 Ways to Love. I don't have a copy of this because the CD sells for an outrageous amount, and it was only released on vinyl once in the box set that came out, but I missed the box set unfortunately. But I'll flash a picture up here so you can see what it looks like. That's their demo, which then leads to their first album, which is called Greatest Love Songs, Volume 666. Very first official Him album came out in 1997. So this album is, honestly, over all of the Him albums, I will still go back and argue that this is their truest metal album. Now, it still has a lot of very poetic, melodic lyrics and things like that, but you definitely hear the influences of Black Sabbath, maybe some Led Zeppelin, things like that, which are all bands that they reference or say were big influences on them at this time. So, I know some people might argue whether it's metal or not, and it's up to you to decide, but I do think, especially compared to their other work, this is their most metal-like album. And, the album cover fits it. Ville Ballo's on most of the album covers. But yeah, it's this very sort of romantic kind of goth metal at that time. Does pretty well, not really known yet, certainly not known in the States. This is mostly Finland. It's cool too, because I showed that picture of the 666 Ways to Love. That is actually a photo of Ville Ballo's mother that they sort of manipulated to look all cool and old. And you can kind of see the similarities in how they treated this album cover also. So, yeah, and again, for me, the reason this was so big is being a Midwestern kid. I was in Southwest Missouri, in the Bible Belt, but not really a religious person myself. All I was really being exposed to, because this is still early internet days, starting to become a big thing, but I was listening to Linkin Park and Stained and all those bands. The radio-friendly bands is all you really had access to. So I come across this, and it's his Infernal Majesty. It's so dark and evil, and I was like, oh, fuck yeah, this is awesome. And so, yeah, that was a big reason why I got into this, especially at that time. And we'll get into more of that later, of how I actually got into them and all that. But first album, great album. Probably one of my favorites now that I'm older going back to it. It wasn't back in the day, but I really, really do love this album. Second him album, this is the one that most people probably got introduced to him with, which is Razorblade Romance. This was the big album that took off in the U.S. We'll go into sort of the order of things a little bit later, because it actually got big in the U.S. after their fourth album came out. But yeah, this one's a banger. This is what a lot of people love. It's a little more rock heavy and not metal. Not a lot of metal in this one. But they do carry over some of the songs from their first album. The first one they did some covers too. One of their most well-known covers is a cover of Chris Isaak's Wicked Game, which they sort of make a goth rock version of. Similarly to how Typo would do some covers and make it their own sort of thing. They also do a cool cover of Don't Fear the Reaper. My favorite version of Don't Fear the Reaper. It's awesome, so check that out if you haven't. But they carry over some of their other songs onto this, one being, I'm trying to remember it, Your Sweet 666, which is a big one. And again, it's a lot of themes with mixing, like, sort of satanic imagery with, like, poetry or Shakespearean love, that kind of stuff. Even the song Join Me is based on Romeo and Juliet's Join Me in Death, sort of, we'll die in the afterlife, we'll die and live in the afterlife together, sort of thing. So this is a big album for them. Really shot them up in Finland. They lose their first drummer from the first album and bring on, it goes by Gas Lipstick, who to my understanding was actually kind of known in some metal circles in Finland at the time. But he takes up this gig and stays with them almost till the end. It is interesting, I learned, so they did use a drum machine on this before they had Gas, because they didn't have a drummer. So they used a drum machine, which was interesting. It actually sounds great. I don't see any issues with it, so I thought I had a picture of them all here, but I didn't. The one different about this album in my collection is the other three that I have were the ones put out by The End Records, which were the last releases of the vinyls, which all are 2 LPs. The first LP is the full album. The second LP has a lot of extras like live performances or demos and things like that. But this one I picked up is actually the Jimmy Franks Recording Company release, which I think is from 2014. The reason I wanted this release of it is because this has the fullest version of the album, and it's the version that I got originally on CD back in 2003 or 4. So it's got some of the extras. It's got the Wicked Game redone for this album, re-recorded, which is sort of the better sounding one. Also, One Last Time and Sigillum Diablo. Both were extras that were included on the US release when they were trying to promote this album to sort of get them an audience over here. Which, again, there's a whole story behind that, but we'll get into in a little bit. But we'll get through these first 4 albums first. So yeah, big one for a lot of people. Certainly a bold move of them to have the pink shirtless Ballo on the front, but it did well. All the ladies wanted to be with him, all the guys wanted to be him, was always the thing. So yeah, that's their second album. Third album comes out, which is called Deep Shadows and Brilliant Highlights. This album takes a little bit of a different feel on it. It definitely gets more into that sort of romantic side of the goth genre and what they were doing. A little bit softer, have some mildly heavier songs, but not really anything metal by any means. But certainly a very romantic goth album. So that's Vile, that's Mij, the bass player who we went to high school with. Linde, I think is how he goes by, or something like that. That's the guitar player. Gas, who's the drummer. And I'm blanking on the keyboard player's name. But this is also the first album that they get this keyboard player on, because their original keyboard player from the first 2 albums quits sometime during the recording or right after Razorblade Romance comes out. So this album comes out. This is when they really start gaining some traction. They're starting to play some larger festivals. You can find on YouTube. There's a video of one of the huge festivals that they play, and I think it's in Germany. But I did read that the band actually almost broke up over this album because Vile was sort of taking it in a slightly more poppy, they thought, direction. The band thought it was more poppy. They wanted to go maybe a little bit heavier metal direction, so there was some arguments over that, but they made it through in the end. And it's kind of ironic that they were worried this was going to be too poppy of an album, because much later on down the road in their career, it gets into the realm of some poppy shit. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But, yeah, great album, softer, used to be kind of my last favorite. I really dig it now that I've gotten a little bit older. It's a solid, just gentle goth album. So, good one to check out. And then their final album from the first era. So they have 8 albums total. This is the final one from the first era, which is called Love Metal. What's cool is on the vinyl, they did the same print that they did on the CD. There you go. It's got a cool sort of black behind the gold background there. So this one, they come back full circle. It is a good completing album to this first era of their discography, because you really kind of get everything with it. You've got some metal tracks on here. I mean, you know, us metalheads probably don't think it's metal, but for the sake of talking about him, it is metal to them. So some metal stuff, some of that romantic goth stuff, and just some straightforward rock and roll kind of songs, goth and roll, if you will. Very well received album. This is a real popular one, of course, among a lot of people. Got a cool picture of them jamming there. Also, when they start incorporating a lot of big heartograms in the background of their shows and stuff. So the heartogram is the official symbol of him. As you can see, that's what they do there. Symbol Vile came up with, so very obvious pentagram with heart on top, sort of their whole vibe, right? Some light satanic imagery with lots of love. So yeah, that's their final album in that first era. So the reason that's considered a lot of their first era is because it's about that time when that comes out that Bam Margera finds out about them. So to all of us millennials, if you're in the 30 years to 40 year range, and of course around that, other people might remember it too, but we were really big into Jackass and Tony Hawk Pro Skater, right? Those are two big fucking things when you were in junior high and high school in the early 2000s. Skate culture was a big deal, even if you weren't a skater. I was not a skater at all, but I was super into the culture and the products around skating. Big part of that was because of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. And, of course, Jackass, which incorporated a lot of that, too. And all of us being dumb, young kids were super into the ridiculous stunts that Jackass was performing. So Bam Margera, being a part of both cultures, he goes over to Finland to, I think it's on a skate tour that he was going over there for. And on the plane right over there, he hears this band hymn. I don't know if his buddy had a CD or something like that. But he fell in love with it. He absolutely loved it. When he got there, he tried to pick up everything he could from them. He was able to find the live show they were playing, went there. He just told the bodyguard in the back, he's like, "Hey, I'm Bam Margera from MTV. I'm here to see Vile." And they were just like, "Oh, okay, yeah, sure." So just let him in. Goes back, meets Vile. They end up being kind of hitting it off and becoming friends. So he brings that all back with him. And he adopts the heartogram image, starts putting it on his skate decks, gets it tattooed. He actually has the same tattoo Vile has here, this exact same tattoo right above his manly parts. He gets that on. So he's putting him in all of his music videos. Even the guitar player had a side project called Daniel Lioni. That's the intro song if you've ever seen... whatever his show was, whenever he stopped doing Jackass and had his own show, the Bam Margera show or whatever, that was the intro song to it. So that's how this starts getting exposed to a lot of people in the U.S. And that's kind of, in a roundabout way, how I got exposed to it. So around this time, and again, this would probably be about 2003, 2004, give or take, I get into my first rock bands. Auditioned for it, got in, it was super awesome. And all these dudes were much more into metal and stuff than I was, but Rob, the lead singer, who was also a skater and into that culture, was already had the Razor Blade Romance album because of Bam. He was a big fan of Bam and stuff. And we were hanging out at his house one day, and he had it sitting there, and it was playing, and I was like, what the fuck is this? This sounds, I fucking love this. He's like, oh yeah, this is him. This is Razor Blade Romance. And he shows me the album. I'm like, that is an interesting album cover to say the least, but it is intriguing with all the pink, and who's this fucking guy on here? Let's check this out. So, listen to it, fall in love with it. Again, at this time, I really only been listening to, a lot of the new metal stuff. It was everything that was on the radio. Like I said earlier, being a Midwestern kid, you don't have access to a lot of different stuff. And again, it's before the internet's really taking off, or before I was really getting into it. So, find out about this band. Love them, right? So the first thing I do, and y'all are going to laugh at this, but I go to fucking Hot Topic, because I don't care who you were, if it was the early 2000s, and you were in junior high or high school, if you wanted to go buy some music, you went to fucking Hot Topic. Because that was the cool place. It wasn't corporate like FYE or whatever some of those other ones were. What was it? Virgin Records or whatever. We didn't even have one of those around there. It was pretty much Hot Topic, or Walmart was the only place to get your CDs. So, go to Hot Topic. Turns out they are just picking up on it, and they have all their CDs for sale. So, I buy them all. So, even though this is sort of the first album that gets everybody into him in the United States, it is after Love Metal comes out that all starts getting put in the States. So, we're kind of late to the game on that. But Hot Topic starts carrying them heavily, I think. For a while, it was the only place you could get it. Which again, back in that day was a big deal, because it was either that or you get on eBay through Finland, which the shipping was outrageous on. So, it was a lot easier to just get it there, which was cool. It's also the first time him has a vinyl release, which is of Razor Blade Romance. I think you can still find those copies floating around. Just a pink vinyl. But, yeah. So, that's how I get into them. And just real quick, I'll show you some. So this band I was in, right? We wanted to be this. We wanted to be him. We wanted to be somewhere between Metallica and him. That was our big dream. So I'm going to show you some really embarrassing photos of myself in my first band. Are you ready? It's bad. Here we go. So there you go. That was my very first band. You see me with the hair, and of course those fucking stars that were all over everything in the fucking early 2000s and shit. Oh, we thought we were cool. We sounded terrible. One of these days, I still have a DVD that we made of one of our performances at the Springfield skate park. I'm gonna try to figure out how to upload that for fun. But yeah, we thought we were badasses, as everybody does in their first band. But so that's all that. Move on. Start getting into other stuff, and I get surprised because I make a friend, this girl who's also really into him, super into goth and stuff, and her mom surprised us by getting us tickets to go see him in Chicago, which was a big deal because I had never been to Chicago. I've never really, other than St. Louis, Kansas City, and Missouri, I hadn't really been to any big cities, so this was going to be fucking awesome. So we go up there. We all go up there and we go see. It's going to be my first big concert of a band that I really like, and I was just ecstatic to see them. So this is going to get into some of the story time here. So I'm probably 15, I think, somewhere around there, and we get up there, and this girl's mom, she's from Chicago originally. I think we're out kind of in the suburbs, and her uncle is a firefighter. And we get there a little bit early, and he's actually out on a date with someone that night. So he meets us at the house afterwards because we're going to stay with him. And he's been on a date. He's had some drinks. So he comes in, he's just a total Chicago guy, like the accent and everything, Chicago firefighter. He comes in, we're sitting there, and he just starts making drinks for all of us. I'm like, well, fuck, I've never fucking drank before. What the fuck is this? He's like, oh, you're fine. I was like, fuck it, I guess we're doing this, right? Sure. So it was the first time I drank. I think I had 2 whiskey and Diet Cokes and was fucking trashed up my ass. So going to the him concert, it's my very first time also drinking, which was an interesting experience, to say the least. Also the first time being around weed and stuff that was at the concert. It was just a lot of firsts. I was this very sheltered Midwestern kid, and the first night being in Chicago, this is the cool, awesome shit that happened. So, very exciting times for young me. But, so the next day, we're going to the show, which is at the Riviera Theater, which is also kind of fun because when we lived in Chicago, we lived in Chicago from 2014 to 2018. We actually lived for a while just down the road from the Riviera Theater, so it's kind of nostalgic to get to go see all that. But so we get to the show, and the whole day, me and this girl, that was my friend, were like, there's going to be a long line, we need to get there early. And everyone's like, no one knows who this band is. Like, no one's heard of this band before. There's not going to be any line, you're going to be fine. Well, we get there, and there's a line out the back, down the road, into the neighborhood. Like, it was massive, so we were like, fuck, there's no way we're going to be able to even see them. We were so bummed out. So we go to the back of the line, and her mom's like, hang on a minute. So she leaves. We don't know what she's doing. We're kind of sulking a little bit, because whatever. And so she comes looking for us, looking through the line and stuff. She finds us. She's like, come with me. Okay, sure. So we go up, and we go to the front of the line, and this dude that's holding tickets there, he's like, okay, yeah, just stand right here. So he kind of stood to the side, and he's like, okay, so yeah, when the doors open, you're just going to go right in. We're like, holy shit. Like, front of the line, and there was, like, people who had been there, because we heard them complaining behind us, that had been there for, like, 2 days waiting to get in here. We're like, what the fuck? What did she do to get this opportunity for us? I still to this day don't know. I think it was just kind of a sob story sort of thing. I don't think she did anything too crazy, but I don't know. And dude also gives us both posters. So here's the original poster from my very first hymn show, sold out at the Riviera Theater. It's kind of hard to see. It's very old at this point. And slightly brittle. But yeah, still got it. The Riviera Theater sold out. As you can see, we knew it'd be sold out. The older people in the group did not think it would be. But yeah, so that was cool. We get to go right in, front row center. I had a little disposable camera with me, and I got to take some photos. So I've got some of those. They're terrible quality because it was a disposable camera in a dark venue. So but I'll show you some of those. It was actually a killer fucking lineup too, and I did not know these other bands at the time, but it was cool to get to see them. So the first band that played was actually Monster Magnet, which him actually I think even covered one of their songs later on. But of course later in life found out who they were and was like, holy shit, I should have been paying attention to them at that time. They put on a great show though. It was awesome. And then the second band to go on was Off Der Mar, which is the main person in that group is Melissa Off Der Mar, and I had no idea who she was either, but she was actually the bass player in what's the first band? Smashing Pumpkins. After, I think it was Darcy was her name. After the original bass player left, she played bass, and then after she left Smashing Pumpkins, she started playing in Hole, the band Hole, which is Courtney Love and all that. So that was her second thing in the 90s. Then after that, she started her own project called Off Der Mar. Came out with 2 albums. This was the tour she was on with him for the first album. It's a really cool, interesting album. It kind of maybe fits into goth genre a little bit, but it is one that probably no one's heard of, but I would highly recommend checking out because it is really, really interesting. And I actually grabbed the CD at the show. This is the original CD from back then. This is what it looks like. There's Melissa Off Der Mar. It's a hard one to describe. I mean, it's got it's kind of got some gothy rock stuff, really interesting lyrics, but really cool stuff. So that's getting thrown in there because again, that was a really cool experience to get to see her and see that. We got some pictures of that too. There's some pictures of Off Der Mar at that show. So yeah, that was awesome. And so after that, him goes on, and it's, it's funny because it's like when you get older, you can't recapture this. Because now it's like, it's awesome to see bands. They're fucking fantastic. But you have more of that breaking down the wall of you recognize they're also human beings. It's not this like godlike image when you're a kid seeing your favorite band. You know what I mean? I wish I could still get that, but it was at that time, man. The band comes out, they start playing, Vile Vallo walks out, and I was just starstruck. I was like, holy shit! It was so cool. It was really cool to get to experience that, but got some photos from that too. Here are the photos from that original show. So yeah, killer show. It was awesome. They played great. So that was about the time they released an album called And Love Said No, which is a greatest hits album. This is also why this sort of marks a first era, right? When you have a greatest hits album, that's sort of the end of an era, if you will. And a pretty short-lived era, right? 97 through basically 2003, 2004 is when they do that. They do release a song on there called And Love Said No also. I don't have a copy of that CD. But also on that, which was kind of cool, going along with their covers, and this is original from that era, so the jewel case is destroyed, but they also do a cover of Neil Diamond's Solitary Man. I got the single CD from that. Really fucking cool song. I had no idea. I didn't really know who. I knew of Neil Diamond, but didn't know a lot about him. And my mom was listening to this, and I was listening to it, and she's like, holy shit, that's a Neil Diamond song, and not a super popular one at that. So it was an interesting cover for them to do. It's really stellar, though, and to be honest, being a kid, I wasn't searching out a ton of music before this time. It was through finding this band and trying to dig into stuff and find more out about them that I started doing that with other bands, too. And that's also like Chris Isaak. I didn't really know who he was. I'd maybe heard the song Wicked Game before, but because of hearing this, I started digging into him a little bit more. Certainly Neil Diamond, and I'm actually a huge Neil Diamond fan. I know it's kind of goofy, but the dude was a fucking great songwriter. And it's because of that song that sort of got me into it. And then also, there's lots of other bands too, and I'm not going to talk about this one a lot because I'll probably pull this up in another video. But there's other bands sort of circling around from Finland at this time, too. One is Charon, which is a great one, and then also the 69 Eyes, who had been around a lot longer than him. They started in the early 90s, and they were more of a Hanoi Rocks is their big influence, but think like Motley Crue, that kind of stuff. They've been re-releasing their vinyl lately, too, so I'm going to show off some of those. This is one of their earlier records that's more of a sleaze metal, as they call it, but more of that sort of Motley Crue kind of, hair metal sounding, but more with the goth vibe. This is what they looked like. This one came out in the early 90s. It was way before him was putting out their stuff. After this, they start moving into more of a goth realm also. The reason I bring this up is because this is one of those ties, right? So this album comes out in 1999. This is kind of considered 69 Eyes' first goth album. There they are. And Vile Vallo sang guest vocals on a lot of this. So this is 99, 2 years after their first album, Greatest Love Songs, Volume 666. 1 year before Razor Blade Romance comes out. But Vile does a bunch of guest vocals on this. Also, if you're into goth stuff, this is definitely a band to check out too if you've not heard of them. I think they've made the rounds quite a bit in the goth scene. This is the album after that, Paris Kills, also a killer goth album. But I'll talk more about them another time when we do another goth video. This is about him. They also do some cool stuff. I'm trying to go through my collection here. So they do this song with Apocalyptica. If you're not familiar with Apocalyptica, they are sort of like a mellow quartet band or celloist band. I think they got big because they did some Metallica covers and stuff on cello, but they do this original single, which has Vile and the guy from the Rasmus on vocals. Just a cool, pretty song, very goth. Bittersweet is the name of it. That was a cool release. You start getting a lot more of those happening at this time too. A lot more singles, a lot more Vile getting involved in other things. I think he did some guest vocals around this era in a sort of like folk Finnish band. Now, not folk like we think of when we think of like folk metal and stuff like that. It was more of like a very traditional pop folk kind of thing. So not metal or goth at all, and like I said, I kind of attribute folk now to a lot of metal stuff just because I've listened to so much of it. But yeah, a lot of different stuff starts coming out. Also start releasing this stuff. Because again, they're getting real big in the U.S. They're huge in Finland. They're starting to get big around the world. They released this, which I think it was around that time. Yeah, 2006. So it's a collection of all their videos. Just a cool one to have. Has a lot of live stuff too. Has just about everything they've ever done. So it's got all their music videos and a ton of live clips. You can see that there. I had my original version I lost, so I had to rebuy it. But the original one was actually a Finnish release of this, and it also had the second DVD, which was the one that BAM did, because, going back to BAM's involvement with this, about the time this starts coming out, BAM starts bringing them over to the U.S. a lot more, and he actually directs, when Love Says No, and when Love Said No comes out, he is kind of the one that gets that all put together. And he also directs the music videos for, I forget which ones, Solitary Man he does, and I think it's the And Love Said No music video or something like that. They actually shoot both videos in the same day, or within 2 days or something like that. But this is kind of where BAM starts getting his credits for filmography and doing some things like that. He had done a lot of skate video stuff, but he starts getting involved with that. And he has some credit that's due. He did really bring this band over and get them exposed into the U.S. market, which really kind of had them blow up. Also at this time, another Hot Topic release that I thought would be worth a shit ton of money someday, but it's not worth jack. But it's cool to have. And they release a box set of all of their singles. So this has all of their CD singles leading up to this time. And this is pretty cool. It has a bunch of acoustic versions of songs, alternative versions of songs, just a bunch of sleeves. But yeah, it's a cool little collection. It came out at Hot Topic. I think it's worth maybe $5 or $6 now. But it's fun to have. Fun to have. I'm not a big CD single person, but again, back in the day when I was big into him, I was trying to buy up everything I could from them. So still got all these in my collection. Alright, so it's about this time is when him makes their big move over to the U.S. So they've been based in Finland, doing all of their production and recording and everything in Finland. And because of all this attention they're getting from the U.S. and because of BAM and everything, they decide to set up shop in California. So this is the first album of the second era of him, which is Dark Light. CD is a little broken, but whatever. Dark Light. Recorded in the U.S., produced in the U.S., comes out in 2005. So this is right before I graduate high school. So this comes out. And it is a hit for a lot of people, because a lot of people still weren't maybe familiar with them, but they get their first radio hit, which is Wings of the Butterfly. First time any of their songs have been played on U.S. radio. So this one, for me, personal experience, when I first heard it, I was a little disappointed. And I think this is something I've heard a lot of people who are around my age say. Because this one comes out and it feels like they have lost that sound that made them different from everything we were hearing in the U.S. It was something unique and different when it was in Finland. It was this super strange, inaccessible goth thing that we didn't understand. And it was really cool and interesting. And then this comes out, and it's very much an album produced in the United States, using a lot of stuff from music that was big in the States at the time. This is, of course, my initial reaction at the time. I had actually gone back and have learned to appreciate a lot of this album, and still, I do love it. There's some good stuff on here. But it marks a very different direction for the band. A lot more of your pop rock stuff, definitely radio-friendly. Wings of a Butterfly is a majorly radio-friendly song. But they've got some cool stuff happening on here that didn't happen in their older stuff. So, like I said, I think it was Love Metal, the last one, I think I mentioned this. They started doing some things with, like, having changing up some of their songs a little bit, right? And having longer ends to them. When you think it's going to end, it kind of continues to go. They start doing that more with this album. And I'm trying to remember the song, In the Night Side of Eden. I actually think, though, this album at the time, I was like, it's not a hymn album. The Night Side of Eden, in my mind, is the most hymn song him ever came out with. It's just a cool, beautiful song. It's got an interesting melody, interesting movements. It's really gorgeous. So yeah, this is the album that was the transition into the modern era, and them being a U.S. band. So this sparks my second time getting to go see them. Same people, same girl I was friends with. I go with her mom and my grandmother, because they were actually friends, so we go up to St. Louis to go see him, which was pretty cool. Very excited to see him still, but we'd gotten that first row situation the first time, so I was a little more relaxed about just kind of hanging out and seeing him. So we're staying at a hotel right next to the venue, which was, I can't remember the name of the venue, but they drop us off, we get in line, get there early this time, so we've got a pretty decent spot in line, and my friend's mom and my grandmother go back to the hotel. So we're standing there, and my grandmother calls me. I pick up the phone, and she's like, "You'll never believe this." She said, "We just fucking ran into Ville Valo." I was like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "They're staying at the same hotel as us, and they're staying on the same floor as us, 2 doors down from the hotel room we're in." I was like, "Holy shit, that's awesome!" And she's like, "Yeah." So apparently, what happened was her and my friend's mom are in the elevator going up. The doors open. There's Ville and all of his garb ready to go for the show that night. And my grandmother said he looked at him like, "Oh, there's no way these two women are going to know who I am. They're not kids." You know what I mean? But then it was very obvious that they did know who he was because of how much of a fans we were. So he was very surprised that they even recognized who he was. So they end up, they're like, "Oh, can we get an autograph?" He says, "Sure, but I'm going to be down in the bar downstairs. Just come meet me down there." So they go down. He's reading a book and I think drinking some wine or something. And my grandmother gets this picture with him. So yeah, that's my grandmother with Ville Valo. And she also got him to sign this for me, which is pretty cool. So yeah, this is 2005, same year that Dark Light came out. So yeah, got a signature. That was cool. So it's a great show. They play a lot of their older stuff, which is what everybody wants, right? And then they play some of their newer songs. It's great. It's awesome. It goes well. So about this time, I'm sort of moving out of that phase of listening to the music I was listening to then. I'm about to graduate high school. I was getting really into 90s grunge stuff, kind of late, but getting into it, like Pearl Jam and Nirvana and Alice in Chains and stuff like that. Getting a little more into some metal stuff too, like Opeth was big at that time for me, and Danzig, some of those bands, also folk music. So start not paying as much attention to him because I am changing, I'm getting into college and all that stuff. But like I said, I was a little disappointed in Dark Light at that time. Now, I look back on it, it's a great album, but at that time, a little disappointed, sort of lost its shine, if you will. But then they come out with another album that was a surprise. I didn't know they were going to even come out with another one. And this one comes out in 2007, so this is a few years after Dark Light. And this is Venus Doom. Again, surprised this one came out. This one takes a much different turn. Now, musically, I feel like it stays pretty on par of kind of where Dark Light was and stuff like that, but lyrically it goes to a much darker place. And we can all speculate on what that was. There was some information with that. A big change, real quick, going back on this, is when they came over to the States, they were not expecting as many people to recognize them as they did, and they were sort of getting jumped on the streets and stuff. So Ville cuts off all his hair, goes all short with his hair. It's not the long black goth stuff. And that's you can kind of see the paintings a little bit what he looked like there. But this comes out and everyone's kind of like, okay, where was this after from Dark Light? Because that seems like you're going in a poppy direction. And the music's similar, but the lyrics are so damn dark on this. And it turns out, and this is not something I'd usually even talk about or care about in a band. People's personal lives are their personal lives, no matter what they do, and we all go through different stuff. But it was at this time that Ville was really going down the path of alcoholism. And in fact, in the thank yous on this, he thanks, I think it was Passages Malibu is where he ended up going to rehab. But during the recording of this, he was not doing well, mentally and physically. I'm only sharing this because it was shared a lot back when this came out, but he was like defecating blood. He was drinking so much. He was drinking in the studio. It was just really going downhill. I don't really know why. It's his business of why that'll happen. But yeah, he was going to a really dark place. So that comes out in this album, especially lyrically. And there's some cool stuff musically with this. There's some acoustic songs and everything. And it's definitely, I think, brought a lot of people back into it a little bit with this band, because Darklight was poppy. This one sort of got everyone invested in it. It's unfortunate under the circumstances, because again, he was in Malo was in a really dark place. I think the whole band was in a dark place from this. So it's kind of shitty to say like, oh, this album was great because it took them back to their roots or whatever when they were going through such hard times. But just from the musical standpoint, there was a lot of emotion in this one. So this comes out. So after the recording of that, he recognizes he's got to go to rehab, which he does, and to my knowledge, it's all well. He's kind of off and on again, but he never gets back to that place. And again, the reason for bringing that up is because I think him getting sober, and this is an age-old tale, right? A musician gets sober, their music goes down a different path, and they get new fans from that, and there's also a major backlash from their new sound, which is this one. The name of this is Screamworks, Love in Theory and Practice, Chapters 1 through 13. So this is a very interesting era of him. 2009, I think, is when this one comes out. Yes, 2009. So a couple different things going on in the music scene at this time. So 2009 was kind of the peak of a lot of the emo scene, which had been boiling since the early 2000s, maybe going back to the 90s, but emo is becoming really big at this time. Vilay's sober. He's in a much more positive mindset. And I think the combinations of those things is how we get this album. I was very disappointed when I first heard this, especially coming off of this one, which was so dark. When I bought it on iTunes is still a thing. I think the first comment, and I don't know if you guys will be familiar with this band, but the very first comment on review on iTunes was, "What is this never shout, never sounding fucking bullshit?" Never Shout Never was a really, we're talking about emo, that's like the pinnacle of that sort of kind of whiny singing and all that sort of stuff. And I'm not knocking on emo. I know there's lots of fans of that stuff. There's bands I loved from that era. We all go through that phase, and there's some genuinely good music in there. There's also some really bad music in there. But the point of bringing that up is because you have the more positive lyrics coming out of this. I mean, the more positive viewpoint. They're definitely taking some musical cues on the production side from the emo scene. And you have a whole generation of kids, because, I graduated in 06, but you've got kids that are, got a decent amount of time between there, where this is maybe their first exposure to it. And I have seen a lot of people, when they refer to him, saying this was their first him album. So this is where the grumpy old man in me comes out, because I'm like, the first 4 albums are really the only ones that matter. Everything after that was shit, right? We all say that. It's also the same way everyone's like, old Hot Topic back in the day was real Hot Topic. Now it's just bullshit. All that's just cranky old shit. Everything evolves. Everything changes. It's fine. And that includes musicians. And if they want to try something new, they're absolutely allowed to do that. So, in retrospect now, I'm like, you know what? They were trying something different. And there's nothing wrong with that. They're in a different place as a band. They sound like they're becoming healthier people. So, of course, your music's going to change when it's reflecting how you view the world and how you feel. But at the time, I was angry at this album because of how poppy it was. I've gone back and tried to listen to it. There's some good songs on it. I just can't really do it. You can see it's kind of beat up. This is my original copy when I bought it. It is what it is. Some people love it. More power to you. There's nothing wrong with that. I just still can't quite stomach it. It's just so poppy. There's definitely some original hymn sounding stuff in there, but it's worth trying out if you're wanting to go through this catalog. But that is their third album in the new era. So for me personally, that was kind of it for me at the time. I was like, I'm done. I'm not gonna listen anymore. I'll listen to those first four albums and be fine. So it's actually come up into recent times. So in 2014, I think, no, 2013, they released their final album, which is Tears on Tape. I had heard it came out. The artwork sort of looked somewhat similar and this sort of vibe to me, so I'd never paid attention to it. I was like, no, not my thing. This comes out, and a few years later, Gas the drummer ends up leaving, saying, he just wants to go a different direction, and then the band ends up calling quits pretty quickly after that. So up to that point, so we're talking 2009, basically up until... I think I finally listened to this in about 2017. So I started getting into metal a lot. It was about 2014 when I really started getting into metal, and then of course, that's pretty much all I got back there, black metal, all of that. So I'm getting into much heavier stuff, not really paying attention to what's going on. I hear they split up. That's also right before that's when they started releasing the vinyl, so I'm like, oh, of course, I've got to have those in my collection. They're from my high school days. I still love the band. I got to pick them up. Tried to go see them. They were playing one last show at the House of Blues in Chicago on their last tour, but scalpers fucking bought all the tickets, and they were reselling them for $400 or $500. So I was like, no, not going to happen. So I finally picked this up. And... I was genuinely surprised when I listened to it. I was like, okay, this is solid. This is a much, and this is an opinion, of course. Again, I'm not trying to harp on you. If you are a fan of him and like this album, that's totally cool. But to me, I was like, this is what this should have been. This should have replaced this. This feels to me, it was certainly a good album for them to exit on. I feel like this was the album where they sort of culminated all of their past. So you've got some of the gothy stuff and some metal stuff a little bit from the early days. You've got that transition in the United States where they start getting more on the American side of production. You've got some of that influence in here, but you definitely still have some of their older style. Interesting melodies. Only a couple moments I was like, there's a song where Vile starts a cappella and he sounds a little off. I don't know what the choice was with that, but that's really the only negative thing on this. It's just a good, solid album. I don't know if it's as interesting as those albums from in the early days, but again, that's my favorite era from them, so I'm biased on that. But this was really solid. I was kind of sad I didn't pay attention to it when it came out because unlike the other first or second wave, if you will, of him, they got some vinyl release, but this one was actually released on vinyl. I missed it. And it's pretty expensive now. I think $70-$80 for one of those. So CD you'll have to do for now. But this was a solid record. I think this was it makes sense. The sound of this makes sense. Again, culminating everything that there was before. And it was like I said before, good album for them to exit on. It was solid. So I would recommend checking this out for sure if you are a him fan and would like to hear some of the newer stuff and you haven't given this a chance like I did. I would say overall, if you're a fan of like goth rock type stuff, those first four albums are where that's at. That's definitely the goth rock realm. These last four albums are they were going through some different things through this, so definitely worth checking out. They were a slightly different band when they were doing these, but certainly nothing to scoff at. 8 albums under your belt before calling quits is pretty solid, and all of them did really well on the markets. So. Not that that's necessarily proves anything, that's all just the capitalist side of the music industry, but they did do well, especially a Finnish band coming over to the United States. To my understanding, they are the highest selling band from Finland ever in the United States. They have actually maybe the world, I want to say. From going from a very underground goth band in the late 90s up to being pretty big here in the States. Not that, the United States is the end-all be-all for everything, but it's impressive. So, Oh yeah, and I wore my Alley shirt because while I was at in that first Chicago show that I went to, where I drank for the first time and was around weed for the first time and all of that. I also got to see the Alley, which if you ever got to go there when it was open in Chicago, it's like a big sort of metal and goth store. They have you can get tattoos there and piercings and stuff. So my mind was blown being a young Midwestern kid in Chicago for the first time. So thought it was appropriate to wear my Alley shirt. But yeah, that's my hymn collection. Again, that's the band that really I was big into when I was younger and helped open the door to things much later on. Yeah, obviously can babble about it for a long time, and I did babble about it for a long time. But yeah, thank you for checking it out. I will have my next video will be a metal video. We're actually getting some metal stuff, so looking forward to getting back into that. But wanted to do this one for a while, so. Thank you all for tuning in and hanging in there with me. We're at 50 minutes. Nice. So, thank you all for being here. Appreciate your support, and we will see you soon. Metal and Goth forever.